In this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, the Hallock is back with an Arrow Lake performance fix redux. Next. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Dave Altavilla for Hot Hardware here with my compatriot Marco Chiappetta and the illustrious Robert Hallock of Intel. How you doing, fellas?
Doing okay. Can't complain.
Yeah, can't complain. Thanks for having me.
Season's greetings and all that happy stuff.
Absolutely.
Are you refreshed and or organized and calm for this time of year? The calm before the storm before CES?
No. To CES is always chaos for everyone. It's chaos for the companies. It's chaos for media. It just is, and that's part of the charm, I suppose. But I love CES. Yeah, it's part of the charm. You have Christmas, and then you get on a plane and you go to Vegas, and it's fun.
That's it. Yeah, you have to keep the positive attitude. It is a bit of a hustle, but it is a great event that we can get together with all our tech-minded friends in the industry, and that gives you a really good chance to shake hands and say hello to a bunch of folks all at once. But if it only wasn't with 150,000 of your closest friends beyond that circle, that would be great.
Not only 150,000 of your closest friends, like all packed into one room. Sometimes it's or one hallway. It's just, if you haven't experienced CES in person, it's just wild. There's nothing like it. Maybe the old E3, I suppose. It's just it's pretty fun.
Yeah, man. And it's funny. I called you the Hallock coming into
the Hallock
league. And look, who doesn't like a piece of haddock? Oh wait, Hallock.
It's weird. I like both, actually. Yeah, those are both appealing to me. To all the other Hallocks, and there are many. Today I am the Hallock. You can be the Hallock next time.
Absolutely. Marco, how you doing today over there, buddy? You get the new digs behind.
Oh, new digs. That's right. Look at that.
Yeah, it's I'm living out of boxes. At least I'm hardwired right now. This is the temporary setup with a crappy camera, but we're progressing. The old house was listed yesterday, and hopefully I'll have all my stuff here soon, but making progress.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. And you might want to, should you be able to do this easily, turn up your level on that mic just a hair, because you're a little soft. Or pull the mic towards you.
How is that? Better or worse?
Slightly better. Slightly better.
That's as high as it'll go. I'll get it closer to my mouth.
Yeah, there you go. If you can, that'd be good. I see you got the road going there, and that should be able to do the job. Well, hey, Robert, great to see you again. Thanks for coming back and giving us an update. We have teed this up as offering a lot more details than the last time you were here. But the last time you were here, you were thinking the timing was going to be a little sooner than later, and now it's pushed out a touch on Arrow Lake. Let me back up actually real quick before we dive in. Folks, when Arrow Lake launched, if you are playing catch up yourself on this issue, when Arrow Lake launched, Intel had some performance claims across the board about various different workloads, productivity, content creation, and gaming as well. Of course, the gaming numbers on the reviews at launch were a little softer than Intel expected, and then there was some root cause analysis that was to go on to figure out why the disconnect between performance expectations and performance realizations in some of the reviews. And so here we are today. Intel has done their homework, thought we were going to get updates and fixes sooner, but it's taken a little bit longer. And now Robert's here to bestow upon us where they're at. But did I capture that all fairly well, Robert?
I think that's about right. I would say though, we've basically closed every issue that we found. I suppose I can break it down into two buckets, and we'll get into this. There's despite all the reports that we received, we found that many of them actually could just be attributed to one issue or another. So at the end of the day, there were 4 root issues that we needed to address, and fixes for those are actually already in the field right now. They've been coming out over the last 2 weeks or so in drips and drabs as update schedules allow. But we kind of waited for everything to be ready together so we could just be like, look, this is done, solved, case closed. Now the other column is some new performance opportunities we've discovered. Things that aren't in BIOSes today. That comes in January. That last bit comes in January. But as far as the issues go that were in flight during reviews, done.
Okay. And depending on, as we were discussing before the stream, depending on the state of someone's system at the time they've looked at performance, they may or may not see significant changes in performance until this next drop, at least until this next drop that comes out in I think it's the January timeframe, but we'll talk some more about that. Is that fair?
Yeah, as kind of like a high level statement, I think it's fair to say that some of these issues are intermittent, that you could run a test one time and see the issue, but run the same test the next time and not see the issue. Some of them were only in effect on certain motherboards or certain BIOS revisions for those motherboards, or on certain software versions that we did or did not push out via Windows Update. So the upside could be a lot or could be very little, depending on what is going on with your system and when you collected that data. Rewinding the clock back to the BIOSes and the software that was available end of October, that will be the best ground floor, because that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to address the issues that got discovered with that software stack. Now, if you had some Windows updates hit in the interim between then and now, you might have clawed a substantial performance or substantial amount of that performance back because of software that we pushed over Windows Update in November. So, my top line message is, you may see small numbers, you may see big numbers. It really depends on what your system was like or is like currently.
Got it. All right. So you really have been making good to your word when we had you on last time about beginning to roll out fixes November, December timeframe. And so that is in motion now. And then there's more still to come. We will dive into the specifics here shortly. We have a whole grid of details that you were so gracious to provide us. And so let's set the ground rules, folks. If you have questions for Robert, Marco and I will be fielding them from the chat. So fire away. As usual, keep it civil, be nice, don't troll. And some of the better ones we'll even feature on the stream, so that Robert can answer them for us live. And so if we can get some good stuff in, we'll certainly try and do that and get your questions answered as well. Marco, anything else that I'm missing here before we fire up Robert's performance topics, root causes, and status updates?
Yes. Right. There's hundreds of people currently live and watching. We're streaming on multiple platforms from StreamYard, but we only see comments on YouTube Live. So if you're commenting on another platform expecting to get a question answered, we're not seeing it unless you're on YouTube. So if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Twitter, please head on over to YouTube if you want to interact live. Other than that, I think you covered everything.
Cool. All right. Well, did we want to let's pull up the performance update that Robert has shared with us. And let me see. I will share my screen, go to the app, and hopefully get this added to the stage. Okay, there we are.
There we go.
Hopefully folks can read this. You may have to maximize. We are streaming in 1080p. It is a bit of detail on a single slide. But this will be published actually, hothardware.com. We have an article, I believe, going up in minutes, if it's not already up, where you can see this slide live for yourself as well, and even download it probably. But let's talk about it. It's a field update, 1 of 2, Arrow Lake S performance update. And let's, I guess, step through each of these one at a time, Robert. And if you could kind of speak to them, that would be great. So unusual scheduling, high run to V variation, low 1 T-scores, intermittent 1.5 increase in DRAM latency, performance lower on Windows 11 24H2 versus 23H2. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so this is actually, before I even start, everything we're going to talk about today is actually going to be published on a blog on Intel.com, our community portal. So, if you didn't catch the stream or you want more detail, all of this will be covered in the blog, including this image. So the PPM is a performance and power management package, and the thing you need to know about Windows is that, as many people know, is that there are power plans. Those things are labeled balanced, high performance, power saver, etc. And for good reason, out of box, those plans are relatively generic to accommodate a wide range of processors from, a wide time span in history. Now, it's customary for hardware vendors like Intel to push an update that overwrites those default settings with more optimal settings for the hardware that you have. Intel does this through Windows Update. AMD does this through chipset drivers. But the point is that these updates are really important to the proper functionality and performance of the CPU. Those performance settings can affect how quickly a CPU frequency ramps from low to high or high to low. It can affect when a core is parked or in a deeper sleep state. It can also prevent a core from going parked or into a deeper sleep state. Maybe you're gaming. You don't want a P core, for example, to go to sleep because you need it available, even if it's not really being used. And then, like, the latencies sometimes of waking up a core or ramping a core, that has a time cost to it. And all of this nets out to a scenario where the CPU may not be in the right operating state for the workload that is being run. And right operating state could mean many things, right? Maybe you have P cores that are sleeping when they should not be. Maybe you have E cores that are sleeping when they should not be. Maybe you're at a lower frequency than you would want for the workload. But all of this is handled by this PPM package. It's hugely important. And unfortunately, we simply mistimed this update with Microsoft. We scheduled this PPM to go out over Windows Update to coincide with retail availability the day of launch. But unfortunately, it was not ready for reviewers. And there were some procedural oversights in Intel that prevented this important package from being available to reviewers. Now, you can see that the performance cost can be modest or significant. And it really depends on which one of these issues you were hitting on when you ran that specific workload. And so, for example, with the high run to run variation, these things can be intermittent, right? The CPU might be in a quiescent or sleepy state the first time you run the workload, but when you do it again, because most reviewers and most users run multiple times in a row to collect an average, maybe the CPU has now been nudged to its higher performance state, and you get a much higher result the second time. Now, this update, this 2161 build of Windows, exists primarily to provide that PPM package. This is not a Microsoft error. This is not a Windows problem. We did not time this package correctly. So, if you've been baselining data on 2161 or data collection after this product launched, you actually already have this fix. This fix came out in early November. And all of these fixes are actually now in the field. They're public. but we wanted all of them to be ready at the same time before we gave an update, because we didn't want people to have to come back and get multiple updates. So that's the PPM. That's why you could see things like a 50% increase in memory latency, because you might have a core that's sleeping that needs to make a memory transaction. So you have to wake it up first, bring it to high frequency, and then execute the transaction. And that's the latency cost. And you can see how that would affect single thread performance. And so this PPM was designed to, like I said, modify the OS power plan. And it just so happens that 23H2 had a slightly more aggressive out of box power plan. And so that explains the difference between these two versions of the OS. And again, not a Microsoft problem, not something that they did, right? We request these performance settings, and we got this one wrong. So this is already in the field now. So I'll stop there. Questions or thoughts?
Yeah, good stuff. So
can I jump in one sec, Dave? Just because it's relevant to a question in the chat.
I was just going to underscore one thing quickly first. Okay. Folks, that if you're trying to read the grid here that's in front of you on the screen, just to give you a sense, if you can't see it so well, 6 to 30% performance loss would have been observed before this was rolled out, and it does vary with a combination of issues. PPM also stands for power plan management, for folks that don't know the acronym. Okay. Yep. Dive in, Marco. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's actually Robert's probably already answered it, but just for the sake of clarity and interaction, I want to pop this on the screen. So Paul Alcorn from Tom's Hardware is specifically asking, Paul. Were the PPM packages missing in Windows available in the chipset drivers distributed to press reviewers?
No, Intel publishes these PPMs through Windows Update. We'll be transitioning to a different mechanism in the future to help avoid exactly this scenario. But we don't use chipset drivers like our competitors.
Got it. Okay, so that's clearly answered. All right, sorry to interrupt you, Robert. Go ahead.
No, that's a valid question. Good question, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good question. Thanks for stopping by, Paul. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. And looking forward to seeing you at CES.
Yes. Well, I'll be there. I'll present and accounted for, I'm sure.
Yeah, you guys and Paul, like some of my industry favorites. So, okay, so the next one here, yes. Intel Application Performance Optimizer. We got a number of reports during reviews that games that are supposed to benefit from APO did not benefit from APO. Before I even dive in, it's important to understand what APO does. Games sometimes take a fairly CPU agnostic or generic approach to querying the number of cores and threads inside a CPU. And they don't always make the right call. And that is a phenomenon called overthreading, where the game sees a large number of cores and threads available and spawns that many threads within its own workload. And the number of threads ends up causing contention with itself. Like there's too much traffic going on in the CPU, and it's actually negative for performance to have this going on. Sometimes on SMT products, many users over the years have commented that SMT sometimes hurts gaming performance. So in past products, APO could, for example, on the fly for that game, disable SMT. And that could result in a performance uplift by negating the potential drawback of hyperthreading. But the thing you need to know is that APO is on a per game basis. We need to go specifically profile every game that benefits from this, verify that it can take advantage of the performance tweaks that APO applies, and then we have to roll it out to users broadly as a combo driver BIOS update. However, the correct functionality of APO depends on the CPU being in a normal and expected state. So if you're missing, for example, this PPM where the frequency may not be behaving quite right, or the cores aren't available in the expected way, then APO cannot take effect because it doesn't see the environment that is necessary to do what APO does. And so this is kind of a 1-2 punch. If you didn't have the PPM package, then you also didn't have APO. And so that's what I mean about some of these issues can be combinatory. Some of these issues can be transient. You may be testing games that don't hit on APO, so you would not see this line item. But this also was solved as a function of that 2161 Windows build. Once we got the PPM deployed, the system is now in a state where APO can take effect and the games can benefit. And APO ranges anywhere from 2 to 14%, depending on the title on Arrow Lake S. So that plus PPM can be pretty damaging. And I saw a couple reviewers, unfortunately, with this specifically, they were quoting, figures kind of in the range of 30% lower than what we had expected. And that is almost certainly as a result of this 1-2 punch. And again, not every reviewer had this, not every user had this, because users were able to buy hardware after these Windows updates had already released. So, we're talking about a day zero review data versus now type situation, not the interim updates that have happened between October and now.
Yeah. Wow. Talk about a perfect storm. I mean, when you look at the review community, the tech editor community that, on these launches, we're usually all grinding away, with not enough hours in the day to get it done. And then you see some of these wildly varying results. It causes such churn and confusion that it's just rough. So, yeah, I mean, not something you want to have happen. And I'm sure, Robert, you and your team are looking at ways to ensure these pitfalls aren't tripped over again, because it's dicey.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Like we have been in daily meetings on this since like end of October 28th or so, if my memory serves, 26th, somewhere in that range. And I'm not going to get into the particulars of the process and procedure changes that we've made, but it's been a valuable learning lesson. We've made some changes. And yeah, I'm optimistic about those changes. And going forward, we have our slice of humble pie, and we'll eat it, and we'll learn, and we'll move on. And that's all we can do.
It's all you can do. Yeah, it's not, as the saying goes, it's not always so much the problem, it's how you address the problem. And that's good to hear. I'll feature this in, and I think, Robert, you kind of answered it already. User claiming big Cyberpunk performance claim, more than 60%. Other games experience the same effect here, but I think the answer is depends on the game, right?
Depends on the game, and I do not want to get over my skis promising that other titles will experience this kind of uplift. There was a pretty perfect storm on that one with a particular CPU instruction that just got much better with the patch to Cyberpunk. So that that was a conspicuous outlier in early data, and not reflected on the chart here because it's not an umbrella issue. But yeah, we did find that with Cyberpunk, and to credit to the developer, they jumped on it extraordinarily quickly. Game update out in the public in a few weeks. They were outstanding partners to us. So my gratitude publicly to them for getting these updates out on Arrow Lake.
Cool. Marco, let's have you jump in here. I don't know if you had any questions that we're fielding, or do we want to let Robert move on to the next one?
Yeah, no, we have some APO related questions, and it's just some general stuff. But we had Khan asking a question, basically asking if the optimizations that come via APO will ever be handled in another way. It is Are the optimizations that come by way of APO, will there be a time where they're just incorporated into Windows updates? They're part of firmware? Is APO, basically that software layer here to stay, or are those optimizations something that may evolve in the future?
That's a wonderful question. We could spend like half our time talking about this one. I'm going to say very bluntly that software level performance optimizations for CPUs is a huge part of gaming performance in this industry, whether you know it or not. The scheduler for any operating system can only do so much, and writing in game specific or application specific exceptions for every CPU that could ever pass by that operating system is not a sustainable practice. Features like APO are not the only thing that we're working on. There is huge performance upside available from software optimizations like this. And so this is a permanent part of kind of the menu of performance tweaks that we can introduce on a product to raise performance. And we'll keep doing it, because not doing it or trying another way will not give the same performance benefits. So count on updates like these, like APO in the future. It's a big piece of gaming performance.
Got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we can. Let's move on to the next section. There was other similar questions, but you've kind of answered everything through your talk. So maybe we should talk about the BSOD problems. That you got.
Yeah, blue screen. Oh boy.
Yeah, this one was unfortunate. So for those who are only slightly aware, Easy Anti-Cheat is an anti-cheat service. It is owned by Epic Games. Anti-cheat, Easy Anti-Cheat, relatively lightweight, thin layer to prevent people cheating in online games. Really nice service. But it uses a driver, and that driver has kernel mode access in Windows. And it just so happened that when we were sending this hardware out for review, there was an incompatibility between the Easy Anti-Cheat kernel mode driver and Windows 11 24H2 that would result on a blue screen, not only on Arrow Lake, but also Raptor and Alder Lake. So but it was really unfortunate that it lined up with the review period for the hardware and became a documented known issue very late in the review process. And so unfortunately for both us and reviewers, they were getting these blue screens, couldn't explain why. I totally understand the instinct to blame the hardware, because that's the variable that seems to have changed, but it was in fact a driver issue for Easy Anti-Cheat. Now, Epic Games has been extraordinarily responsive. There is already a new driver build. It is already available to publishers and developers. It is already being pushed over digital delivery services. Nothing that needs to be done from Intel's side. I think most of these games are already fixed. One sort of exacerbating circumstance is that reviewers and enthusiasts often turn off virtualization-based security, VBS, because it boosts performance. Right? It raises performance for games in particular. And that basically guarantees you're going to hit on this issue. Which, kind of a freak accident here, that there was A, this issue, B, this common habit that people have, and it just happened to line up at an unfortunate time. But this one also solved pretty much across the board.
Okay, and it was solved in okay, so yeah, Epic has rolled it out.
Yep.
And then down the bottom, before we move on again, final update requires Intel Microcode 0x114, Intel CSME firmware kit, and a bunch of numbers there.
A bunch of numbers.
Yeah. and then Windows 11 26100 dot 2314 or newer. We'll talk about that one. That's coming up.
Yeah, can I jump in 1 second, Dave? Slide back to that edge of the slide there.
Sure. I'm zooming in so folks can read it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, and folks, if you're looking at this slide, what you'll notice is the fixes talked about earlier regarding PPM were in build 2161, which is in the wild. Build 2314 and newer is not in the wild yet. So
actually, small correction: 2314 and newer is in the wild.
Oh, okay.
That does have performance enhancements all on its own.
Okay.
But independent of the issues we're talking about today, this last row on the table, these are net new performance optimizations that we have in flight for the product. These are things that are not in any BIOS today, that have been developed subsequent to launch, and that's what that is required to have. I'm sorry, you need Microcode 114 and this firmware kit together to expose that benefit. So 114 has already come out. It's a beta BIOS right now from some motherboard vendors, but until you have that CSME firmware kit, which will be listed on the BIOS download page, you don't get this last line item yet, and that's coming in January. We need to do a little more testing. We need to get that testing out to our customers. I don't mean end users. I mean motherboard vendors, their engineering teams. Let them see and experience it. Some of that has already started, but that takes time. And when these BIOSes appear in January will really just depend on how available those validation teams are, what their schedule is like for distribution. So sometime in January for sure, but I don't know exactly when yet on a per motherboard basis.
Got it. It's interesting, and we're looking at the performance you're able to claw back with these fixes, some of which are out there in the wild already. A lot of the chatter in the community, and there are some pretty passionate folks out there, let's just put it that way, that we're saying
Sure.
Intel's not going to get more than a couple of points of performance with these fixes, blah, blah, blah. And when you look at them compounded, if you have them occurring in your system, it is much more than just a few points of performance that you're claiming back here.
That's right.
So it is significant, and we knew, because in discussions with you, the word significant came up, but we couldn't say how much, because you guys were still looking into that. But it's good to know this today, that that there's some good performance to be had out there, to be regained. And from what you're saying, in January, you're going to add a few more points on top of that again, for gaming specifically. Okay, cool. Marco, what am I missing? And I think there's one more.
Wait, hold on. I think we should dive in with the specifics, right, on the BIOS setting, because there's a lot in that one.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
there is a lot.
Yeah. So, Robert, why don't you outline what you guys discovered in those BIOSes and why some people were affected
in the pre-release BIOS row?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're talking preview BIOSes, or what industry insiders call NDA BIOSes or embargo BIOSes, right? These are betas, and fortunately, like, there's a billion settings that we can communicate to our partners about how those settings should be toggled, and there's this massive design doc that specifies the defaults and what they should be. But we probably should have gone back with a VIP shortlist of the most important performance settings, and just double check that they were right in all of these BIOSes and all of these motherboards. And we just missed that step. Right? That that there's probably some blame to share on that one. But some of these issues some of these BIOS settings can be pretty significant to performance. PCI Express resizable bar, we've all seen, that can be somewhere between 2-10%. Some games go even higher. We saw at least 2 reviewers report to us that the frequency of the ring clock, that is how quickly all the CPU cores communicate to one another, was falling from 3,800 megahertz to 800 megahertz.
Wow.
Because of some of these anomalous settings. And again, that's not on every board, not on every BIOS, but at least 2 reviewers in the wild experienced this. And then another one that's pretty severe is the incorrect memory ratio being set. So we call that at Intel gear, memory gear. You'll see memory vendors talk about that as well. But what we're really saying is if your memory is running at one frequency, your memory controller is running at another frequency. So just for the sake of easy math, if I have DDR5 6000, that is 3000 megahertz on the memory. And in Gear 2, which is kind of the out-of-box default, the memory controller is 1/2 the speed of the RAM. So if you're at 3000 megahertz on the RAM, the memory controller is at 1500. And it's called Gear 2 to put it the other way around because the memory frequency is twice that of your memory controller.
Yeah.
However, we found a couple boards or a couple BIOS releases that were setting Gear 4 out of box. So now your memory controller is 1/4 the speed of your RAM, which I saw memory latency figures as high as 190 nanoseconds, which is well over twice what it should be. Yeah. And we all know that memory latency matters to gaming. And so when you suddenly double it from an anomalous BIOS update or toggle, then you're taking a performance hit that is not immediately obvious to you. You have to really know what you're looking for to detect that, or maybe fire up CPU-Z or another type of analysis tool and just happen to catch that the setting is wrong. But even then, you have to know what you're looking for. So these could be one or more settings depending on the motherboard and BIOS. Some had none of these issues wrong. So this is probably the most circumstantial of all the ones in the list because it was highly, highly individual. What board you're on, what motherboard BIOS version you're on, plus all this other stuff. It adds up. But this one is was the hardest to track down actually, because we were getting all these mixed reports, but it didn't correlate from one motherboard to the next or one BIOS version to the next. This one was a real pickle, to put it lightly. But this is also solved. This was actually the first set of issues that we fixed about 2 weeks after we embarked on this root cause analysis. So customer BIOSes for motherboards are already in the field. All of these default settings are correct. So these are the big four. You can see that there were many more issue reports than there are root causes, but that's because many of the issue reports could actually be root cause to one thing or another. So we do believe that with the combination of the BIOS updates and the Windows updates that you see here, that we have put this to bed, that it is done.
Cool. Yeah, we should, in the community now, we should be revisiting this again to look at the before and after. And we have the before numbers. The question's going to be the varying degrees of the before performance.
That's right.
That's out there right now. It's a little tough to, you know what I mean? Like ideally you'd want to see the worst case scenario, right? And now show today. But that might not be as easy as we think.
Well, even that first line item, seems really, really serious. But for example, if you turn on the high performance Windows Power Plan, that gives you 95. I'm just ballparking, but like 95 or 98% of the benefit of this PPM. Right. The reason why we distribute the PPM is that Windows defaults to the balanced power plan out of box. That is what most users experience. Most, but not all reviewers also use that plan because understandably it's the out of box default for the OS. Of course you'd use it. So if you did switch to a different plan, you may not have seen this issue at all. Right? Or you were on the extreme low end of the range. So that's what I mean about these gains being highly variable or circumstantial. It really depends on your exact system config and how it was set up before you started running tests. Our goal now, the end goal where we are today, is that you just install Windows, update it, flash your BIOS, and that's it. Like we've made the balance plan behave as we intended, so everything works out of box as it should.
Cool.
Yeah, if I could just give some quick inside baseball
for
people not in the industry, right? For the community that actually reviews this stuff, we are often seeded with different configurations. Some sites have better relationships with some motherboard vendors and may have early access to different boards. So depending on your preferred publications and where you get your information, it's entirely possible one publication had one set of numbers that looked a certain way and another had another set of numbers that may have looked better or worse. So that's why you see sort of mixed reactions amongst the community, amongst different publications. It's kind of all over the place, and there's so many permutations and so many possible hardware and software configurations.
That's right.
It's going to be all over the map, right?
Like Cyberpunk is a, if I could interject real quick, Cyberpunk is a great example of this, right? So the patch comes out, they promise 30%. The very first review that go live says 9%. The second one says 90% performance improvement. How in the world do you get that kind of range? Yeah. Well, it is conceivable that the person saying 90% was comparing all the way back to their pre-launch data. The person saying 9% may have received some or all of these patches already, and now they're just testing just that one update in micro. Who knows what else might be on their system, right? So there are many ways to produce this extreme range in performance results. And I really want to caution, like, to Marco's point, it depends on the reviewer, depends on the website, and depends on when it was tested and how it was tested. Right? You will see a big range here.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to not just to explain, if you go read our data at Hot Hardware, I'm probably one of the most conservative guys out there when it comes to reviewing hardware. I like to use Windows defaults. I don't tweak anything. I want a reader to be able to look at our data, and if they have the same hardware, but they're maybe not technically astute enough to dig into the BIOS or whatever, they should be able to replicate the numbers I put up there, right? Because I'm not tweaking things to oblivion. I'm running it as most users would. So if you look at Hot Hardware's data for our Hour Lake review, and you have your hands on hardware, you're probably closely matched with our data if you haven't done a ton of tweaking. Okay, sorry, just wanted to get that out there.
I dropped a link in the chat to your review, but
great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I want to be clear. We try absolutely the same thing, right? It is, well, it's unacceptable to do anything else, right? You want to go out with performance data that you can trust, reviewers can trust, public can trust. Your integrity and dignity is on the line when you make those kind of claims. I and one of my peers, we take personal responsibility for that at Intel. This is our job to make sure that the data is trustworthy, valid, reproducible. And I still believe that our original data was correct. Our original position was correct because we had all this stuff in our software stack. The issue was the translation from Intel internal to the outside world. Right? There was a communication gap. So I still think our original data was right. I think it may actually be even better now as a result of updates like the 2314 build of Windows and some of the optimizations we've done in that PPM. But yeah, we care a lot about making the data as out of box as possible. It's super important. And that's why we're in this pickle, right? Like Intel said one thing about the data and it was something else, right? There's a reputation gap. And I'm here because it upsets me. That's probably the light language that I will use. It upsets me that this happened. And I'm fortunate to have a position at Intel where I can help provide process changes, procedural changes to avoid this in the future. And being in these meetings daily, sometimes on weekends, nights, to figure this out. There is a large team at Intel who is also taking this very personally. Engineering teams, validation teams, customer support teams, marketing, comms, right? None of us foresaw this. And I suppose I just want to say I'm sorry, right? Like we missed this, and we've instituted new rules and procedures to not miss it again. But we let you down, and we're trying to make it right. And I hope that these software updates do that. I hope they provide the data that we promised and intend for the product. And fundamentally, I think Arrow Lake S is good. I've converted my system to a 285K. I'm loving the power efficiency. I'm loving the NT. I play at 1440p, so it's really nice at that resolution. And I trust that these updates will help change hearts and minds. I think it's fundamentally a good product that was hamstrung by some unfortunate missteps on our side.
Yeah. Hey, not for nothing, but I mean, you've got a lot of moving parts here, as we can see now, and hopefully folks can appreciate how complex this thing is, especially with a new architecture. And so, not to say that it couldn't have been avoided. Clearly, some cross-checking, as you detailed, could have helped things out. But this is why you're Intel, right? This is the hard stuff. You do the hard stuff. So, it's a lot easier said than done, I guess, is the point. And then looking at the root cause and the resolution of it, and the steps, and just all the moving parts. Just a lot, man. A lot of stuff going on.
Well, it honestly, we couldn't have done it without the reviewer community or the user community, right? It is with the massive matrix of variables, that feedback really helped, right? And I acknowledge that the reviewer community owes us, the company, nothing. They don't owe us anything, right? You're independent media, independent reviews, and your conclusion is your conclusion. So, for the reviewers like yourselves who went out on a limb to provide performance reports, logs, traces for the users who were sending us videos on Twitter, Blue Sky, hell, even Instagram, it was hugely helpful. Right, hugely helpful, because some of these were so complex that without a ton of incoming data points, this could have taken much longer. And so, thank you, right? Thank you. That's my big takeaway. Not only from myself, but from the whole client team. We're grateful. And for those who don't know, client is just industry slang for CPU team. Sorry, I should clarify. We're grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good stuff, Robert. I mean, yeah, it's funny, folks that aren't in the industry, that are users, but that frequent our site and other sites, many of the great sites that are out there, Deep Tech Press. It is a lot of work to provide a performance review with this level of detail that Marco put together for us, for our site. And I hope folks support the publisher ecosystem that is out there these days. There's been a lot of reduction and then acquisition and consolidation in the space, and it's really it's kind of a blood, sweat, and tears passionate industry that is behind you.
That's true.
Hopefully it goes on for a lot longer. But man, talk about an evolution in the way we all communicate now. We're fortunate enough with all these different mediums that we have now that folks like Intel, big companies like Intel, can get direct user input, direct feedback to kind of rally the troops and pull together a better product. So that's good stuff.
It really does help. Like, we can't always comment on or reply to every suggestion that we get, but we absolutely keep our finger on the pulse of what people are saying, and that feedback is valuable. You may not see the outcome for a month, 6 months, or even years, right? But we take it very seriously, and it depends on what that feedback is and what type of solution it intersects. You know, piece of software, easy; piece of hardware, longer term. But yeah, like keep it coming. We all are in this together. I think at the end of the day, like I'm a PC enthusiast. I'm gonna spend my night playing Dragon Age Veilguard, right? So, like you know, I was affected by these issues too, right? And so I have a personal vested interest in helping the community address them, and many at Intel feel the same way because they're all PC enthusiasts too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a passion, that's for sure. Marco, anything else for questions in the chat, and then I think we can probably wrap. But we'll come back to the last bullet about the new BIOS performance enhancements, what to expect and when, quickly before we do. What are we missing in the chat? I know there's a couple. I saw a couple of good ones fly by.
Yeah, you know, actually, there's some stuff that, you know, that the typical passionate enthusiast tone in some of the questions that I'm not going to put up on the screen. I just want to say to folks, when numbers are put out there, right? If what we're seeing in testing doesn't match what we're provided from Intel, that makes our job like much harder, because we spend many hours trying to figure out why before going back, right, to the manufacturer that set us up with the hardware. And the flip side is it doesn't help a company like Intel when the numbers they provide don't line up with what reviewers are finding in the wild either. So there's tons of difficulty and extra work that's involved when something like this happens. So to suggest that perhaps people are putting out numbers out there dishonestly or nefariously, it's BS, right? That's the bottom line. I wouldn't want to put my name on something if I can't stand behind that data. So I'll just say that. And, you know, there have been a few questions that rolled in, not necessarily directly related to these fixes. Robert, can you just give some education to some of the folks out there on why CUDIMMs can hit higher frequencies and whether or not they're a requirement for Arrow Lake? We know they're not a requirement. Can you explain, though, why CUDIMMs are important, perhaps to achieve peak performance in some setups?
Yeah, I'd love to. Love to. That's a great question. Okay, so when your memory controller is talking to your DIMMs, there is a constant stream of data being passed back and forth. And we refer to this concept called the data eye, which is the stability or integrity of that data signal. If I send a binary 1 to RAM, I'm just making up a hypothetical scenario, you hope that it comes out a binary 1 on the other side, or vice versa, right? But when you start playing with extremely high frequency DIMMs, or even 4 DIMMs in a system, preserving the integrity of that data eye, that signal stability, gets very, very hard. It's quite stressful for the memory controller to do that with consistency, right? It may not seem like the CPU and the memory are very far apart, but from the perspective of like electrical signals at a motherboard level, they are miles apart.
Yeah.
Right. It's very challenging to keep that signal good and healthy as memory frequency goes up. Okay, so that takes me to CUDIMM, which has a little extra chip on the memory module itself that essentially acts as an amplifier. It gets the signal from the memory controller, boosts the signal, and then sends that to the memory chip on the DIMM itself. And that helps amplify that signal to preserve and enhance the integrity of the signal, right? You're not relying on the memory controller to do it all. And so that's what unlocks these higher frequencies from running a CUDIMM. I kind of call it like DDR 5.5, which if you're at JEDEC and listening to me, I'm sorry, but it's a major difference in the maximum speed that a DDR5 module can achieve. And now, not all DIMMs and not all overclocking scenarios need that clock driver, that amplifier chip. But broadly speaking, it is very helpful but extreme overclockers may not use CUDIMMs. This is something more in the realm of, hey, I just want to buy an XMP kit, slap it into my system, get high frequency. It's easy. That's really what CUDIMM helps with. So it's not required for the platform, but it makes DDR5 6400 and above a lot easier to obtain.
Mm. And your platform benefits from that,
Sure.
above
Yeah, that's
100 megahertz, obviously. Sure.
Yeah, that's what allowed us to go from DDR5 5600 officially in Raptor Lake to 6400 in this generation. And I see XMP kits now at 8,000, 9,000 on some boards, some CPUs, right? That is broadly not going to happen without a CUDIMM. So that's a huge advantage for overclocking. Really nice for the platform and for gaming performance overall.
Yeah, good stuff.
What else, Marco? So essentially, those super high clock DIMMs is where the CUDIMMs are going to be most important.
That's right. Pretty much 6400 and up is the cutoff when you start to see those DIMMs.
Yep. So Robert, can you this is not exactly in your wheelhouse, but there's been like half a dozen questions flying by in the chat. Can you speak at all about availability at 285K, and especially in other countries other than the US? Do you have any info on that?
Yeah, I'm not a supply expert at Intel. They keep me in the dark on that one, but I will say that we're talking about issues today, right? Issues that affected the launch, the performance, and that that can make ramp a little sluggish, right? People are understandably leery or reluctant, and my hope is subsequent to these improvements that it kind of pulls the cork out of the barrel, so to speak, and off we go, right? It's going to take some time, right? The retail channel is governed by boats going over oceans, not planes, right? So it takes time, but I think we should see some positivity towards the end of the year and into January.
So retailers probably priming the pump a little slower than they would have just until these issues got worked through, perhaps, is a theory.
That's my best guess. Not having any insider info.
Yeah, no, it's totally plausible. Absolutely. Let's talk about unless there's anything else, Marco. I'm sorry.
I don't think there's anything we have to pop up live here that's super important. But go ahead, Dave.
And we got to be mindful of Robert's schedule here. We only get a couple minutes left. But Robert, let's just finish up on the new BIOS performance enhancements quickly. You mentioned it earlier. It's looking like single-digit gains at the bottom row of this here chart. What's that all about? If we could just quickly cover that.
Yeah, so that's the recipe in the big bold text at the bottom. Part of this process and part of the natural evolution of releasing a platform is that you're constantly trying to develop new performance enhancements for the platform through BIOS updates or through driver updates. And we have a couple that we're ready to check in to the BIOSes that we extend to OEMs before, and then they turn that into the BIOSes that get flashed to your motherboard. So that does require microcode 114. I understand that those BIOSes are already available on some motherboards in beta, but the missing piece is this Intel CSME firmware kit. That's like the special extra sauce that's required on top of 114 that provides this additional benefit. So that will start to flush out to users in January. BIOS updates based on this specific recipe. And when in January will depend on your board, your ODM, their release schedule, their testing schedule. But we broadly expect motherboards to have this in January. And from what we've seen, performance in games is pretty good. This is a pretty gaming focused set of updates in the range of like 3 to 8%, which is nothing to sneeze at. That can make a big difference depending on the frame rate. And so this line item, this last line item, not an issue, not something that affected reviews during launch. These are performance optimizations that are developed net new above everything else.
Yep. Yep. So above the 6 to 30% gain on a fix,
Yes.
and the 2 to 14% for APO, this is on top of that. So
Right. And just to be clear, like I want to be super explicit about this. You cannot go line by line and just add up all these percentages and go, wow, I'm going to get 58% more performance going by the extreme edge. That's not how it works. Again, some of these issues were board specific, BIOS specific, Windows build specific for reasons we've discussed today. Again, no fault to Microsoft. We didn't get the right updates out into the field. So you will come on the low side or high side, or maybe you'll be able to add one of those issues together with another, but not the third. It's just going to depend on how your system was set up and when you tested. So
there you go.
We'll see where the data goes. Oh, I forgot to mention one more thing. Everybody is, of course, curious about the cumulative effect of all of these updates. At CES, which is, I don't know, 3 weeks away at this point, we're going to come back to the table with like a full performance sweep on nearly 40 games. We're also going to look at the final impact of each one of these issues individually. If your system was affected by it, what was the final cost with before and after of launch versus this final recipe. We feel that the reviewer community deserves that. Users deserve that. We recognize that we put y'all through churn and heartache, and it costs time. And so we want to be very forthcoming about what the puts and takes are. So at CES, you will see a final performance digest from us based on this last BIOS update.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to cracking a couple of cold ones with you too. But
hell yeah, this is gonna be great. Gonna be great.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Marco, we got anything more before we let Robert off the hook? I think we're good.
There's lots of stuff, but we could go for another hour. What I want to say to everybody in the chat, right? If there's you're not going to get any questions answered on future product, obviously. But if there's a question that we didn't answer, put it underneath this video when this goes live on the YouTube channel, because the live chat is a lot harder to go try to comment against after the fact. If you have questions, some of them I can answer, some of them we can bug Robert. Throw them underneath the video and we will follow up after this is up on the channel.
Yeah, it'll be up pretty quickly. Usually YouTube takes a little bit to process, but yeah, throw those questions in the chat below, in the comments below. We will get them answered one way or another, whether it's us or Robert, pestering Robert more. But
you know what, I deserve it, right? Like, I work at Intel. It's time for me to take my licks. So bring on the questions, right? Well, we believe that the right thing to do is to be transparent about this, as radically transparent as we can be. That's the right thing to do. So if people have more questions, or when they see the blog that we're publishing, actually it should be live now, let me know.
Absolutely. And I'll drop a link to that blog as well in the comments section, so you have that.
Thank you.
Intel's blog as well. Absolutely. So yeah, Robert, hey, love the attitude. Attitude's everything, as they say, and appreciate you being so forthcoming today, for spending your time with us, and for just stepping up and doing what you can to represent your company, but also to take ownership in these issues and then help get them resolved. That's good stuff.
Well, it goes both ways, right? You guys didn't have to extend me an invitation to come on today. You could have told me to pound sand, publish your blog. We'll let the dust settle and see what happens. But graciously, you let me come on and talk through it. And so I have immense gratitude, and not just for you guys, but the reviewer community really bent over backwards to help us figure this one out. And results were highly variable in those reviews, and I want to be clear, that is no fault to the reviewer. We made tactical errors, and so from all of us in the Intel Client team, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. That's a big one. Thank you for your time, and I hope these updates help make it right. And then from here, keep climbing.
That's it. Absolutely. We're looking for the next one too. Relentless pace of innovation. Good stuff, Robert. Robert Hallock from Intel. Thank you so much for your time today, brother. Good to see you again. Look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas. Folks, find us on the web at hothardware.com, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com, hothardware. We're all over the place. Watch for our CES coverage where we will be getting together with the folks at Intel as well, and covering the announcements that they will be making out at the show, in addition to this Arrow Lake performance update that's coming that Robert mentioned. So yeah, but hit thumbs up and subscribe to make sure you get notified when we go live on the next one. And until that next one, Marco, what will we say?
Thanks for stopping by.
There you go.